Steve Morrison tells a story about a friend of his who liked to read fairy tales to his two young sons at night. This friend had a great sense of humor, and he did something that I often did with my kids, because after you've told those tales and read their favorite book over and over and over, they know the whole book. I mean, they can recite it with you by heart. So I would get to lines like this father did, and get to certain lines in the book, and I would make up different responses or different voices for the characters saying different things in the book says. Of course, the kids would stop me right away and go, "No, that's not what it says." They knew, but it was fun, okay? But you wonder what comes of that. This particular time, he was telling them the story of the three pigs doing that kind of technique with it. So the teacher at school, a few days later, is telling that same story to the children. And she comes to the part of the story where the first pig was trying to gather building materials for his house. She said, "And so the pig went up to the man with a wheelbarrow full of straw and said, 'Pardon me, sir, but might I have some of that straw to build my house with?' And then the teacher, being a great teacher, asked the class, 'What do you think that man said?' This pastor's little boy raised his hand. He said, I know. He said, 'Holy smokes, a talking pig!'" The teacher was unable to teach for the next 10 minutes because of the uproar in the class. We may not be able to predict what our kids and grandkids are going to say. But there's one thing for certain: it will almost always be something unexpected. That's like doing children's sermons. You never know what's going to happen. And that's part of the fun. It really is. Hopefully they will not repeat something we've said that we shouldn't have said and embarrass us. And the other thing we know for sure is that our children are like sponges. They just soak up everything we say and everything we do. What we say to them and about them makes a huge difference in who they are. Our gospel reading for today tells us that what we say and what we do are like seeds planted in the hearts and the minds and spirits of our children and others. Jesus makes it very clear that oftentimes it's the smallest things that make the biggest difference in someone's faith. Let's be sure to plant the right kinds of seeds. The first kind of seed, of course, is the seeds of love. Having grown up in a home where I can't really remember my dad ever saying, "I love you," I made it a point to let my children know that I love them. I mean, and it's sometimes in just silly, common, simple things like I'm heading out the door and I'll call back over my shoulder, "Bye, you, see you, love you." But they hear it. They hear it. And it's important that they hear it. And sometimes it embarrasses them, but at least they know how we feel. And that's important, how we feel about them. We all need to know that we are loved. In his autobiography, The Son of the Ragman, actor Kirk Douglas talks about growing up with parents who had recently immigrated from Russia. He recalls that his mother was warm and supportive as she did her best to adjust to a new country. But he remembers his father as stern, strict, and cold. He was unaccustomed to giving words of encouragement, a pat on the back or a hug, and remained a distant and very private man. But then Douglas tells this story about his father. One evening at school, young Kirk Douglas had a major role speaking, dancing, and singing in a school play. He knew his mother would be there, but he seriously doubted that his father would be. To his surprise and amazement, about halfway through the program, he looked up and saw his father standing in the back of the auditorium. After completing the evening's program, he wanted his father to come up and congratulate him for a job well done, but true to fashion, his father was not able to say very much. Instead, he asked his young son if he'd like to stop and get a 5-cent ice cream cone on the way home. As Kirk Douglas reflects back over all the awards he received in his life, he said he prizes that 5-cent ice cream cone even more than his Oscar. It's not the cone that counted. Instead, it was the love expressed and the attention given that mattered in that simple little gesture. Can you imagine any actor saying that a nickel ice cream cone was more valuable than his Oscar? We all need to know that we are loved unconditionally. That no matter what we do, we will still be loved in spite of it. Of course, the greatest model for that love is Jesus. As we grow in our faith and become more and more like Jesus, we are better able to live and express that unconditional love to others. One of the greatest gifts that we can give is to plant those seeds of love in young hearts. It really is the little things. Plant those seeds of love with care. They will grow and become more precious than all of the world's riches and fame. Next, there are seeds of faithfulness. When God calls, we'd better answer, yes, sir. Nick Thomas found himself at the age of 47, unemployed and under tremendous financial pressure. Though he had a successful career in the Air Force and then in the insurance business, some reversals had set him back and left him with no place really to go. His wife Liz made their situation a matter of prayer. She was in church one morning praying about their dilemma when she thought she could almost hear the words, "Make the mustard." Her family had a mustard recipe they'd brought over from Russia. And every Christmas, she made gift jars of mustard for her friends. Nick and Liz decided to listen to that voice. She prepared a substantial amount of mustard. They packaged it and then called on a local cheese shop. The manager tasted it and immediately bought out their whole inventory. Thank you, Michael. Within 3 months, they had cracked the highly competitive New York major deli market because the Thomases committed their troubles to prayer and looked expectantly to God for guidance. God gave them direction. And they ended up with a multi-billion-dollar business because of it. A holy man once said that a mustard seed is very plain and of little value. But if it is bruised or crushed, it shows forth its power. So faith first seems a simple thing. But if it is bruised by its enemies, it gives forth proof of its power, so as to fill others who hear it with the odor of its sweetness. Finally, there are seeds of grace. I'm not talking about physical grace, which is a beautiful and powerful and wonderful thing. Rather, God's grace. And we do not so much plant the seeds as we prepare the soil for that grace. For the seeds of grace grow and mature and bear fruit in God's time. And we never really know when that will be or how it will happen. The seeds of grace bloom sometimes in the least likely places, but they point to the fact that little things, as I told the children, make a difference. Here's a good example from a fellow pastor. He says, about 3 weeks ago, I got a strange little piece of email. I did not know the person who sent it and almost did not respond. This person emailed me. Apparently, they'd found my address on the church's website and asked, "Is there really a God?" They signed it, "Nobody." I almost blew it off. But instead, I answered it simply, "Yes, there is a God." I really did not expect to hear anything back from it ever. But Tuesday, I got this message. I had just lost my job, and frankly, I was scared. A few nights ago, my family and I sat together, held hands, and prayed. The next morning, I received the following letter. Yes, there is a God. I am so grateful. In the little things of life, the little things that matter, a little goes a long way. And when we entrust that little to God, it grows and blooms and bears fruit in our lives and in the lives of our families. But you have to entrust it to God. It's like today, a New York minister saw one of his parishioners who was known to be constantly worried and depressed, walking with a lively step through Grand Central Station. When asked about his now cheerful disposition, the man turned to his minister and said, George, I've just resigned as general manager of the universe. And it's amazing how quickly God accepted the position. We have to learn to let go and let God be in charge. That applies to God's kingdom. That's the message of Jesus' first parable today. Too often people finally take the risk of planting God's seed by living the Christian life and making a Christian witness. And then they're disappointed that they do not get the instant results they expected from it. They forget that they have to trust God for the results. It's so easy when we do not see instant results in someone else's life around us to think there's no faith there and our efforts were all wasted. But the growth will come in God's time and in God's way. Shortly before Christmas one year, a woman made a healthy investment in a new vacuum cleaner. She could not wait to try it out. So she plugged this brand new electric marvel in and turned it on. And then very shortly thereafter, the motor shut off. And then the motor started again and went off again in a few seconds. And then it started again. She couldn't understand this, but she was trying to get the house vacuumed, so she every time it came on, she'd quick do as much floor as she could. Then she'd wait. Then she'd quick do a little more. She finally got it done. Mumbling under breath and preparing to give the salesperson a nasty phone call who'd sold her the thing, she went to unplug the vacuum cleaner, and she found that she had plugged it into the blinker switch for her Christmas tree lights. That's also one of the points of that first parable. Make sure you are plugged into the right power source. Amen? Amen. Amen. God's power, strength, energy, and forgiveness are available to all of us. God's presence is nearer than breathing when we are connected and plugged into the right source. And when we're connected, the little things of our faith, the seeds that we plant, the seeds of love, faith, and grace will grow, blossom, and bear fruit. Amen? Amen. Amen.